In the dimly lit corners of the animal shelter, there sat a German shepherd, his head slightly turned as if he were waiting for someone to notice him. The shelter was filled with the sounds of barking dogs, some playful, some anxious, and others, like the German shepherd, sitting quietly in their cages. His fur, once glossy and vibrant, had lost its luster. His eyes, though still sharp and alert, carried a sadness that no one had taken the time to understand. He had been here for weeks, perhaps even months, but no one seemed to care enough to take a second look. Each day, the shelter's volunteers and staff moved from one cage to the next, feeding, cleaning, and providing brief moments of attention to the other dogs. There were puppies in the shelter, their tiny paws tapping against the metal floors, demanding attention with their innocent, wide-eyed faces. There were smaller breeds with their eager, wagging tails, practically begging to be chosen. But the German shepherd, he sat quietly, his posture strong but defeated, as if he had already accepted that no one would want him. People would glance at him from time to time, but their eyes would quickly move on to the more energetic or approachable dogs, leaving him in the shadows of his own solitude. This German shepherd had always been a loyal and strong companion, the kind of dog that could protect, love, and stay by your side, no matter the circumstances. But here, in this shelter, none of that mattered. His past remained a mystery to everyone who passed by his cage, and he became just another dog in a place full of forgotten souls. Some of the staff members had mentioned he was once a working dog, but even that didn't seem to matter. Age was beginning to show in his muzzle, and there were whispers that he might not be as active as he once was, but none of that was true. He still had plenty of love to give, if only someone would notice him. As days turned into weeks, the German shepherd's spirit began to fade. He stopped standing up to greet the visitors who walked past his cage. Instead, he would sit with his back against the bars, his head slightly turned toward the doorway, watching others get adopted while he remained forgotten. There was an unspoken sadness that surrounded him, a sadness that seemed to grow with each passing day. The other dogs, though also in need of love, didn't seem to carry the same weight of despair that he did. They were young and vibrant, still hopeful that someone would choose them. But the German shepherd's hope was slowly slipping away. He wasn't just waiting for a family. He was waiting for the end of his time at the shelter, knowing that most likely it would be just that, the end. There were moments, rare moments, when a visitor would stop and pause by his cage. Some would reach their hand through the bars, offering a gentle pat on the head. But there was no real connection, no deep interest. It was as if the people could see the German shepherd, but they didn't see him. They saw a dog that had been at the shelter too long, a dog that might have issues, or was simply too old for adoption. They never took the time to understand the layers of his personality, the depth of his loyalty, and the warmth he still had to offer. His eyes, full of longing, would follow each person as they walked away, his tail barely wagging, but not enough to be noticed. It wasn't that the German shepherd didn't have value. It was simply that no one bothered to look long enough to see it. The world outside the shelter was full of people searching for the perfect puppy, the one who could fit into their lives easily without much effort. But this dog, this noble German shepherd, wasn't perfect in their eyes. He had a past, a history, and a few gray hairs in his coat, but deep inside, he still carried the heart of a dog who would stand by his human through thick and thin. He was simply waiting for someone to recognize that, to see the worth he still had, even in the shadows of the shelter. For now, though, the German shepherd remained where he was, forgotten, alone, and silently waiting. The shelter was quiet, the kind of quiet that came with the fading light of late afternoon. It was the time when most visitors had already come and gone, leaving behind the routine hum of the shelter's daily activities. The German shepherd sat as he always did, facing the corner of his cage, his eyes distant. He had almost given up hope, retreating further into his own mind, convincing himself that no one would ever notice him. His gaze never wavered from the entrance as he waited for the sound of footsteps that would eventually come and go, as they always did. But today, something was different. A woman walked in through the door, her soft footsteps echoing in the hallway. She wasn't rushing like the others had. She didn't come with the excitement of someone who was looking to adopt a playful puppy or a small, cute dog. Instead, her presence was calm, and there was something in her demeanor that made the German Shepherd's ears twitch. She wasn't here to browse. There was purpose in the way she looked around, her eyes scanning each kennel with quiet attention, as though she was searching for something beyond what was visible on the surface. As she passed by the cages, she stopped momentarily at each dog, pausing to look into their eyes, her gaze gentle but focused. She smiled at the playful puppies and bent down to scratch behind the ears of a small, enthusiastic dog who wagged its tail furiously. But as she reached the German Shepherd's cage, something in her slowed her steps. The woman didn't immediately look away, as so many others had. Instead, she took a moment, standing still, and simply observed him. Her eyes met his, those soulful brown eyes that seemed so full of quiet sadness. For the first time in a long while, the German Shepherd felt as though someone had truly seen him. It wasn't just the passing glance that others had given him. This woman wasn't looking at him out of pity or curiosity. She was looking at him with a kind of understanding that touched something deep inside of him. She saw beyond the fur that was beginning to thin, beyond the gray around his muzzle, and beyond the calm exterior that hid the pain of abandonment. She saw him for who he really was, a loyal and loving dog, still full of potential, despite everything he had endured. The woman crouched down, bringing herself to the level of his cage, and reached out her hand slowly. She didn't try to grab his attention with high-pitched words or sudden movements. Instead, she waited, letting him come to her on his own terms. The German Shepherd, after a moment of hesitation, took a cautious step forward. He wasn't sure what to expect, but there was something in her presence that made him feel safe. Tentatively, he sniffed her hand, his nose brushing against her fingers, and in that moment, something shifted inside him. It was the first touch he had received that didn't feel rushed or forced, the first gesture that made him feel like he mattered again. For the woman, it wasn't just a simple gesture. She could feel the quiet strength in his presence, even though he had been left to fade into the background. She knew that this dog had something to offer, something that others might overlook. It was as if she could feel this loneliness in the air between them, but she also felt a spark of something more, something that told her he still had the capacity for love and loyalty. In the span of that single moment, something inside her shifted too. She wasn't here to look at dogs the way others did. She wasn't looking for the perfect dog. She was looking for a companion, someone who needed her just as much as she needed them. As she gently pulled her hand away, the German Shepherd stood a little taller, as if he were gathering the courage to trust again. He hadn't expected this, and neither had she. But there was a connection now, an unspoken bond forming between them. The woman knew that this was no ordinary dog. She could see past the exterior and sense the heart that was waiting to be loved. As the woman stood up and took a step back, she felt a quiet certainty that this was the dog she had been waiting for. This German Shepherd was not forgotten. He was simply waiting for the right person to see him, not as just another shelter dog, but as the companion he was destined to be. And she, in that moment, realized that it was her turn to give him the chance he so desperately deserved. The moment of decision was clear. This was not just a visit. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. With a soft smile, the woman turned to the shelter staff. "I'd like to adopt him," she said, her voice calm but filled with determination. The German Shepherd's tail gave a tentative wag, as if he understood that his waiting had finally come to an end. The decision was made. As the shelter staff began processing the adoption papers, the woman couldn't help but feel a surge of emotions. She had walked into the shelter just looking for a dog, but something about the German Shepherd had drawn her in. Something deep and quiet, something that felt like destiny. As she sat at the small desk, filling out the paperwork, she glanced at him through the cage. His eyes were fixed on her, as if he, too, understood that this moment marked the beginning of something new. For the first time, the German shepherd's gaze wasn't full of resignation or loneliness. It was filled with a quiet anticipation, a glimmer of hope that had long been absent from his life. The woman's heart raced as she signed the final lines of the adoption form. The process seemed surreal, as though it hadn't quite sunk in yet. She had come to the shelter simply to help, to offer her time and love to an animal in need, but she had found so much more than she had expected. This was not just an adoption. It was the start of a life-changing journey for both of them. She had been searching for companionship, but what she found was so much more than that. She had found a dog who needed her as much as she needed him. The staff handed her the adoption papers, and as she stood up, ready to take him home, the reality of the situation began to set in. There were so many unknowns. The German shepherd had been through an unknown past, and there was no way to know what challenges lay ahead. He had spent months, maybe even years, in the shelter system, surrounded by noise, unfamiliar faces, and constant uncertainty. How would he adjust to a home? Would he bond with her? And how would he react to being outside the confines of his cage for the first time in so long? But despite these questions, she knew one thing for certain. This was the right decision. She had felt it in her heart when she first saw him, and every moment since had only confirmed it. She was ready to take him home, to give him the love and care he deserved, and to help him start a new chapter in his life. She smiled to herself as she grabbed the leash and slowly attached it to his collar. The moment felt profound, like a promise being made not only to him, but to herself as well. The German shepherd, though a bit hesitant at first, stood tall when she reached out to him. He knew something was happening, and although he wasn't sure of what to expect, he trusted her. The woman's voice was soft, but filled with assurance as she called his name, gently guiding him out of the shelter. With each step, he seemed to grow more confident, his pace quickening as they moved toward the door. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone. He was walking alongside someone who saw him for who he was, not just as a shelter dog, but as a loyal companion deserving of a second chance. As they stepped outside into the sunlight, the German shepherd paused, taking in the fresh air and the wide-open space beyond the shelter's walls. His eyes scanned the world around him, as though he were seeing it for the first time. It was overwhelming, but it was also full of possibility. This was the world outside the shelter, full of new experiences, new smells, and a new home waiting for him. The woman could sense his awe, and it made her smile. She knew there was much to learn, both for him and for her, but she was ready for the journey. It was a journey of healing, of trust, and of creating a bond that would last a lifetime. On the drive home, the woman couldn't help but steal glances at the German shepherd, who was lying quietly in the backseat. He had been through so much, and yet, in the span of a few short hours, his life had already begun to change. The woman knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges ahead, perhaps behavioral issues, maybe even fears that had been deeply ingrained from his past. But she was committed. She had chosen him, and she would not give up on him. When they finally arrived at her home, she opened the door and gestured for him to step inside. The German shepherd hesitated for a moment, but with a gentle nudge from her, he took a step forward. As he crossed the threshold, the woman's heart swelled with emotion. He was home. No more cages, no more loneliness, no more uncertainty. For the first time in a long time, the German shepherd felt the warmth of belonging. And for the woman, this wasn't just the beginning of a new chapter, it was the start of a love story, one that would change both their lives forever. With a final glance back at her new companion, she closed the door behind them, knowing that their journey together was just beginning. The days that followed the adoption were full of small, quiet victories. The German shepherd, once a forgotten soul in the shelter, was slowly adjusting to his new life. He had spent so long behind bars, his world confined to the cold walls of the shelter, but now he had a home, one that was warm, full of love, and full of promise. The woman had kept her promise to him. She would be there for him, no matter what challenges they faced together. At first, the German Shepherd was unsure of his new environment. The house was different from the shelter. It was quiet, and there were no other dogs around. He had spent so much time in the shelter's noisy, bustling atmosphere, where dogs barked and the hustle of shelter life never ceased. But now, the stillness of the house felt foreign to him. He would walk through the rooms slowly, sniffing every corner, as if trying to understand this new world. There were moments when he would stand still, his ears alert, listening for any sound that might resemble the shelter's chaotic hum. But there was nothing. There was peace, and with peace came the space to heal. The woman was patient with him. She understood that it would take time for him to adjust. That trust had to be built slowly, layer by layer. She spent her days comforting him, offering him food, and taking him on long walks. At first, the German Shepherd walked hesitantly on the leash, not sure of where he was going or what he might encounter. But slowly, as he grew more comfortable, he started to relax. His stride became more confident, and his tail, which had once hung low in sadness, began to wag more often, signaling his growing trust in her. The woman was determined to show him that he was safe now. She would sit with him on the couch, gently stroking his fur, allowing him to fall asleep beside her. There were moments when he would rest his head on her lap, looking up at her with those eyes that seemed to hold everything: his past pain, his fears, and his hopes. But most of all, they held a quiet gratitude. The German Shepherd knew he was no longer invisible. He had been seen, truly seen, and it made all the difference. As the weeks passed, the German Shepherd began to show a new side of himself. He was still the strong, watchful dog he had been in the shelter, but now he also showed tenderness. He would nudge the woman's hand for attention, or follow her around the house, his loyal presence always near. His once somber gaze softened, and his playful side began to emerge. He would chase after toys, not with the frenetic energy of a puppy, but with a calm joy that spoke of the peace he had found in his new home. It was as though he was finally free to be himself, to shed the weight of his past, and to embrace the future that lay ahead. One afternoon, as the woman and the German Shepherd went for a walk in the park, something remarkable happened. He ran ahead of her, his body moving with newfound energy and confidence. He paused, looking back at her, his tail wagging happily. It was as if he were inviting her to join him in this new chapter of his life, a chapter where he was no longer a lonely shelter dog, but a dog with a family, a place, and a purpose. The woman smiled, watching him run freely across the grassy field, his eyes bright and full of life. It was in that moment that she realized how far they had both come. The German Shepherd, once a forgotten dog in a cage, was now thriving in his new life. He was happy. He was loved. And he had a future. The woman, too, had found something in him that she had long been searching for. A companion who would stand by her side through thick and thin. A dog who offered unwavering loyalty and unconditional love. As the months passed, the bond between them only grew stronger. The German Shepherd was no longer the dog that no one wanted. He had become a beloved member of the family, his presence a constant reminder of the power of second chances. He had learned to trust again, and the woman had learned that sometimes the greatest gifts come in the form of a dog who has been overlooked, a dog who simply needed someone to see him for who he truly was. The story of the German Shepherd was no longer one of loneliness and neglect. It had become a story of hope, transformation, and the unbreakable bond between a woman and her dog. As they walked together through the park that day, side by side, it was clear that this was just the beginning of a long and beautiful journey. Together, they had found a new beginning, a beginning that would last for the rest of their lives.